All right, so arboriculture. To be honest, when you sent me these sources, I have to admit I was picturing, like, mostly trees. But looking at this career guide, Arboriculturist, it's way more involved than I ever thought. Like, it's high-tech, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
It's definitely a lot more than just hugging trees. Arboriculture is really this cool blend of art and science,
Yeah.
because you're dealing with living organisms, whole ecosystems, but you're also using some pretty cutting-edge technology to care for them.
So what does an arborist even do all day? Because I'm imagining it's not just planting trees in the park, right?
No, not at all. Think of it more like maybe being a tree detective, a tree doctor even, maybe even a little bit of city planning all in one.
Wow, okay.
Arborists can be out there diagnosing diseases, figuring out if a storm or even some new construction is putting a tree at risk, just making sure that trees are healthy and safe.
Okay.
And they might be scaling a tree with ropes and harnesses one day, and then the next they're analyzing data from, get this, aerial scans.
Wait, really? I read something about the aerial scans in here, and I immediately thought drones. Is that what they're using?
Yeah, drones are being used more and more, and we're not just talking about your run-of-the-mill drones. These things are equipped with something called LiDAR,
Yeah.
which is this amazing technology. Basically, it uses lasers to create these super detailed 3D maps of entire forests.
Wow.
And arborists can take these maps and really get a good understanding of the whole tree canopy. They can spot potential problems, even track how diseases are spreading.
Wow.
It's pretty game-changing in terms of how quickly and effectively they can do their work.
That is way more high-tech than I was expecting. But I guess it makes sense when you think about it. Trees are complex, they're alive, so you'd need to know a lot to be able to properly take care of them. So what kind of background or training do you even need to get into this field?
Yeah, you really do need more than just a green thumb. Understanding biology is really the most important thing. You need to know how trees work, how they grow, how they interact with everything around them. And then there's soil science.
Soil science, I never would have thought of that.
It's actually really interesting because different trees need different types of soil to really thrive.
Right.
So things like the pH levels, how well the soil drains, even the nutrients in the soil, those are all super important for knowing if you've got the right tree in the right place. And that's especially true in cities where the soil might be really compacted or even contaminated.
So all this is already changing how I see the trees outside my window.
Yeah.
I've always, appreciated that they're there. But now I'm realizing there's a lot more going on, like literally beneath the surface, than I ever thought about.
Absolutely. And that's what arborists do. They want you to see that. They're like bridge builders between people and trees, and they help us appreciate everything these trees do for us.
Like they're advocating for the trees in a way.
Yeah.
And speaking of advocating, this guy had also mentioned all these different things an arborist can choose to focus on. It's not all just like hands-on work.
Mm-hmm.
You can specialize, right?
Definitely, yeah. As you get more experience, you can choose to focus on things like tree risk assessment, urban forestry, even research and consulting. Some arborists become experts in one specific type of tree, or maybe they figure out how to best take care of trees in really challenging places like construction sites.
So you could be like a tree surgeon one day, and the next you're advising on a huge construction project. That's wild. But it also sounds like there's a pretty clear career path to get there. So where does somebody even begin?
Well, this career guide, Arboriculturist, lays out a pretty clear path. Like you've got entry-level roles, being an assistant, maybe helping somebody do a tree inventory or some pruning while you're learning.
Right, exactly. It's a good way to learn the ropes, so to speak, and get some experience.
Yeah. And then you can move up, like they mentioned, climbing arborist. I was curious about that. What does that even mean?
Oh, yeah. That's when things get really exciting. Climbing arborists, they're the ones who are trained to use all the ropes and harnesses to get way up into the tree, like all the way to the top.
Which they need to do for a lot of things, like pruning or installing cables, or even if there's a branch that needs to be removed because it's dangerous.
So you got to be pretty brave to do that.
Yeah, it's not for everybody. You got to be comfortable being really high up. You have to be in good shape, and you definitely have to know how to keep yourself safe up there.
Yeah.
But it's really rewarding, too. I mean, you're up there in the canopy working with these amazing trees.
I bet. So this ISA certification comes up a lot in this guide. It seems like a pretty big deal.
Yeah, if you want to be an arborist, that's the gold standard.
Really?
Yeah, the ISA, which stands for the International Society of Arboriculture, they offer all these different levels of certification.
Okay.
And each level has a really tough exam you have to pass, and it just shows that you really know what you're doing, that you're following all the best practices.
So it's like getting your black belt in arboriculture.
Pretty much.
So what difference does that make for your career? Why is it so important to have?
Well, if you're trying to get hired, that certification shows everybody that you're a pro, that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is really important when you're dealing with trees because you're dealing with safety, people's safety.
Right. You wouldn't want just anybody yanking on a tree with a chainsaw.
Exactly. And it's not just about not getting sued. The ISA also makes sure that you're keeping up with all the latest research. You're using the newest and best techniques.
So you're not stuck doing things the old way just because that's how you learned how to do it 20 years ago.
Exactly. Arboriculture is always changing and improving, so you have to keep learning to stay on top of your game.
Okay, so it's kind of like continuing education.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
So let's say you've put in the time, you've got your ISA certification. What are some of the cool jobs you could end up doing?
Well, this guide gave an example of a junior arborist who became a specialist in tree risk assessment. And it sounded like they were really important in making sure that those old trees didn't get destroyed during that big construction project.
I remember reading that, yeah, they really made a difference. But what does a tree risk assessment even mean?
So basically, you're looking at a tree and you're trying to figure out how likely it is that this tree or part of this tree is going to fall and hurt somebody or damage something.
Okay.
So you look at the tree's structure, how healthy it is, what's around it, all of that.
Oh, I see.
And based on all of that, you can usually tell if it's risky, and then you can figure out what to do about it.
So it's kind of like being a tree detective.
That's a great way to put it.
So you're deciding, is this tree going to fall down or is it basically okay?
Yeah, and it's not always as simple as just chopping down the tree.
Okay.
Sometimes you just need to prune some branches or put in some cables to support it. Sometimes you just got to keep an eye on it and see how it does.
Okay, so there's a lot of different things you might recommend.
Exactly. It's not that simple. There are a lot of factors to consider. I mean, you want to keep the trees healthy, but you also have to think about the people who live and work around them, and sometimes those are competing priorities.
Yeah, that does sound complicated.
Yeah. It's all about using your best judgment, making ethical choices, and of course relying on science to help guide your decisions.
Sounds like a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And this is where I think those RoleCatcher sources you found could be really useful.
Right.
I mean, trying to find the right job, explaining what your skills are, it seems like having some extra help with that would be amazing.
Yeah, I agree. And while those sources weren't all about arboriculture, I think a lot of that stuff applies to anybody going into a specialized field like this.
Yeah, like that whole AI resume thing. I thought that was pretty cool. Do you think that would even work for an arborist?
I think so. It's all about marketing, right?
Yeah.
So instead of sending out the same generic resume to everybody, you can use AI to figure out which companies are looking for someone with your specific skills. Like maybe they're looking for someone who's an expert in tree risk assessment.
Right.
Or maybe they really need someone who knows a lot about a certain kind of tree. The AI can help you find those companies.
That makes a lot of sense. And I thought that salary info was great because obviously it's not all about passion, you know. You got to pay rent. But do you think those salary numbers are accurate, especially for such a kind of niche job? Because I'd imagine where you live probably makes a big difference in how much you can make, right? Like, would an arborist in New York City be making the same as an arborist in, like, a small town?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's the kind of thing RoleCatcher can help you figure out. It looks at data from all over the place, so you can get a better idea of what you should be making based on, you know, where you live, how much experience you have, what certifications you have, that kind of stuff.
So it's like having a personalized career coach, but instead of a person, it's an algorithm. Okay, I like it. But besides the money, what's it actually like to be an arborist? What are you doing all day? Are you always outside?
Well, that is a big perk, right? Getting to be out with the trees.
Yeah.
And yeah, you do spend a lot of time outdoors. Could be a park, somebody's yard, even a forest, you know, wherever the trees are.
Okay.
But you're not outside all the time. There's definitely some office work too, like writing up reports, crunching numbers, talking to clients, that kind of stuff.
So you get the best of both worlds. You're not stuck at a desk all day, but you're not living in a tree either.
Exactly. It's a good balance.
So speaking of learning, I saw that RoleCatcher does some kind of networking thing too. Why would that matter for an arborist?
Well, there's a whole community of arborists out there, and even though it's growing, it's still pretty close-knit, you know? So if you know the right people, that can open up all kinds of doors for you. You might find a job, you might find a mentor who can teach you a lot. You just get a better sense of how everything works.
Okay. And RoleCatcher, you know, it can help you connect with people in your area, find out about local groups, maybe even get some advice from somebody who's been doing this for a long time. So it's like you were saying, building those relationships is super valuable. And it seems like RoleCatcher is trying to make that a lot easier.
Yeah, it's all about using technology to find opportunities and build the career you want.
Right.
And especially in a field like arboriculture, which is all about making the world a better, greener, healthier place, those connections can really make a difference.
I started this thinking, okay, trees. But this has been fascinating. I had no idea how much goes into keeping them healthy, especially with more and more people living in cities.
Yeah, most people don't realize it's kind of a hidden world, but once you start to learn about it, you realize how important it is for the environment, for our cities, even for like our mental health.
For sure. So for anybody listening who's thinking about maybe becoming an arborist, what's the one thing you would want them to remember?
That's a tough one. I guess I'd say it's more than just liking trees, although obviously that helps.
Yeah.
It's about having this deep respect for nature, wanting to understand how things work, and really wanting to make the world a better place. Because arboriculture brings all of that together. It's science, it's community, it's the environment, all in one.
That's a great way to put it. And on that note, we'll leave you with this.
Mm.
Next time you see a tree, really look at it, take a moment to appreciate it, because it's not just something pretty to look at. It's this amazing living thing that plays a crucial role in keeping our world healthy, and arborists are a big part of that. Thanks for diving deep with us.